we've got all this talk now about Chinese spy balloons or whatever they're doing up there. It suddenly seems to come as a big surprise to people that it's up there. Now we're hearing that those balloons from China may have been in use for many years.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the fundamental problem with all of this is that now we civilians are seeing the kind of espionage that's happening with a mix of high and low tech. But surely you would think this was happening all the time. And surely you would think that the US is doing, maybe not exactly the same, using exactly the same technology, but pretty much trying to gather the same kind of intelligence about China. That's just what states do.
It's what states do, and all this shock, feigned outrage from governments. Oh, my goodness. So someone's twigged on to it and they said, well, we'll show you, we'll do something about it. I mean, they've had to be pretty stupid not to see a balloon the size of a bus up in the sky, you know, dangling there and taking pictures and whatever it is. So a lot of these things are allowed to happen. Now they're just saying, well, OK, somebody spotted it, so we'll have to be seen to shoot them down.
I think the problem here was the political atmosphere happening in the US.
I was going to say, why now? Why now?
Ago, because that was when Blinken was going to go visit China. And clearly, this balloon had made it onto the news. And in such a sensitive time, you had American politicians really kind of jumping on the bandwagon and saying, we can't possibly have friendly relations with China, given they're spying on us. Well, newsflash, of course they're spying on us, and we're spying on them. But that's not the reason to say, you know, hands up, let's not do anything. But it is just to say, you know, I think everyone needs to calm down a little bit. It's going to be OK. You know, you can shoot these things down, or you can be careful about the kind of intelligence you let leak when you know that they're overhead. So there are all sorts of ways, and, you know, as three civilians sitting around a panel, we don't know the full intelligence gathering that's happening behind the scenes. We don't have the clearance for that, but they definitely know more than they're letting on.
Cindy, I wanted to take your opinion on this story about the hotel in Knowsley, is it? Let me just find Knowsley, and the fact that there's these far-right demonstrations out. There's been a lot of call now from the charities saying the government must step in and say that this kind of violence is just not acceptable. And do you think they will? Do you think they will come out and say that?
Well, I hope so, but I don't know what that would really do, you know, in terms of the kind of the ethnic strife that's going on at the moment. I mean, short of really fixing the asylum system, something that we've talked about on the show before.
But the point is that these are people who have entered the country. They're being housed. They're asylum seekers. They've already gone through probably a lot of trauma, and we are allowing people outside of. They're very vulnerable people outside of their building, you know, being quite violent and shouting abuse. Surely that is, our government does have a duty of care, and they must come out and put a stand against this, because otherwise it's allowed to erupt in other parts of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with that. But the problem is that they're being housed in accommodation like hotels and other places that were just never meant for this kind of stuff. You know, they're not in asylum centres anymore because we have too many of them. So the problem is, I think, still fundamentally a backlog in the system. That means that you're. I mean, I think in those attacks that actually members of the public were hurt as well, because these facilities are just not meant for that. The hotels were always a backstop. And I don't know, I'd rather see the government actually do something to fix the backlog and make sure that people are housing appropriately, rather than putting hotels all across the country.
Cindy, the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, we're getting reports today. He's saying, look, I've had enough of this. We need to fund, he's saying to the Chancellor, the defence budget. We need to up the defence budget. And we're talking about £11 billion he's requested in extra terms. I'm just talking about the surveillance balloons. This shows, and Sarah was talking about this earlier, that maybe it's a different type of defence budget we need for different requirements. Do you think that's so, rather than buying tanks on the ground or new warships or whatever it happens to be? Is it all about, what is it called, cybersecurity?
Technology and cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, I think that a quarter of the defence budget currently goes on personnel, and then the rest goes on to equipment. And I don't know how much the software-hardware split is within that. But I think Ben Wallace is doing a bit of a Zelensky himself, you know, taking the war, using it as a chance to really hammer home his need for more resources. But, all government departments need more resources. Britain already spends 2.1% of its GDP on defence. In situations like this, that we're talking about the grander scheme of things, this Cold War between the US and China, I think we do need to be careful about escalation, and that doesn't mean we don't fund defence, but it means that we don't fund defence above all else. I mean, we do.
No
have
one's going to go to war
crisis.
over a few balloons, are they?
Well, I hope not. I mean, some of the rhetoric coming from the US side, especially the more hawkish side of American politicians, it is kind of scary. I mean, Rishi Sunak himself saying we need to keep us safe and we're on hand to shoot down balloons. The balloons are not here to threaten any lives. They're here for intelligence gathering at most.
And if we knew what was going on around Taiwan, around Japan, how China feels threatened by what the USA does, the USA just owns that whole area in terms of these islands and things that are out there. They've got bases absolutely everywhere. But Sarah was saying that you wake up of a day and you've got things to worry about, getting the kids to school, getting your makeup on, whatever it happens to do, have your breakfast. And you're a bit frightened by what you're...
Well, I'm not frightened, but I feel this is a little wedge into something bigger that they're going to announce later on. So they're just making us aware, be careful, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm not being silly. This could be a wedge to another war. I don't know. But it's kind of, why are you telling me this? Because I've got loads of other things, and at the moment, it's not really interfering with my life. I don't need to worry about it. Why are you trying to say this now, right now?
Look, I think with all of these things in politics, it could be more cock-up rather than conspiracy. So the Chinese may at some point, Xi Jinping may have some point have signed off an intelligence balloons programme. Somewhere down the line, one of the lower officials said, oh, we'll fly a trajectory over North America. I doubt that the man on top really kind of explicitly signed that off necessarily. Or perhaps it does float, of course, whatever it is. There's a cock-up there. There's also a cock-up in the sense that the Blinken visit would have been really good for China. And this has completely scuppered that. So the timing was bad. Then on the American side, once it gets into the media, it's very, very hard to climb down from, especially Biden, who always has to demonstrate his hawkish credentials on China. And so he has to do something, as though he has to shoot them down. And then they start looking for more, and then they can find more. So all of these things, I think there's just a mixture of factors that are less likely to be conspiracy and more likely just to be politicians kind of satisfying their domestic demands, satisfying their party demands, all of these things that happen on both sides.